The story begins with our beloved protagonist lying on the ground, all beaten up, saying that violence was part of his daily life. As he grew up, he was constantly beaten nearly to death by the man he called his father. For him, violence is as normal in his life as breathing. As he thinks this, someone grabs his head. Someone is aiming a coin at his face, and the protagonist asks them to wait. He asks the shooter to hit him like he always does, saying, "There's no need to go that far." The man with the coin asks if he's going to back out now, right after asking for the coin. This guy's name is Kim Sung-ho. He's in jail for sexual harassment and was sentenced to 2 years. Kim says that up until now, the protagonist has done everything to earn money in prison. He shoveled snow for a measly 300 won, warmed shoes for 100, and even became someone's pet to be humiliated for 200. But now it's time for him to become a human target for 500 won. So the protagonist agrees and says he'll do it. This place is a juvenile detention center where the worst underage criminals are held. Though that guy down there definitely looks 40. Crime and violence happen here daily, as if it were normal. Kim was about to hit the protagonist, but the elastic snapped, the coin flew meters away, and ended up landing in a chamber pot in the bathroom. Man, this place is more dangerous than Chernobyl. So Kim asks the other inmates if any of them has an elastic band, but they all say it's rare. Here. Then he calls the protagonist by his name, Cha-ju Young, and says he's really lucky. He tells the poor guy to run and fetch the coin, and the protagonist obeys. But the bastard says picking it up with hands would be too easy and boring, so he tells him to use only his mouth. The coin is sunk deep in there. The inmates say it's insane, especially since just yesterday, someone had explosive diarrhea. Yet, without even thinking twice, the protagonist plunges his face into the toilet. From above, the place doesn't even look like a prison, more like a mansion room, with TV, clothes, books, everything. Everyone freaks out that he actually picked up the coin with his mouth, and call him disgusting, but they also call him a legend, the one who sold his soul for just 500 won. However, the protagonist thinks it's not just 500 won, because with this coin, he just completed 50,000 won. One of the father figures tells the blonde kid, "It's time to go to the playground." Cute, huh? Then Kim tells everyone to leave, telling the protagonist to go last because he reeks. Outside, they talk trash about him, saying he's a goner in a month, gave up on being human. After all, he tried to take someone's life. The protagonist was arrested for attempted murder and sentenced to 3 years. Kim says that money rules everything in prison, but wonders why the protagonist is so obsessed with it. Maybe he owes someone. A guard calls Young, saying he has a visitor. He wonders who it could be. Somewhere else in the prison, a girl shows up asking what happened to the protagonist. Why? He's so thin. She wonders if they're starving him or if he's getting beaten up, but Young says that's not it. She says she told him to make a strong impression in prison, even if that meant gouging someone's eyes out. This girl is the protagonist's childhood friend, and the only one who visits him. He asks why she keeps visiting and spending so much money. She gets annoyed, thinking he's calling her poor, and yells at him. She asks about the coins he gave her, and why he's saving money. She gives the coins back, saying she won't accept suspicious money, and he asks why. She says it's because of the promise they made, that when they graduate, they'd live together in Seoul. She says she'll handle the money, and he just needs to take care of himself in there. Then a guard announces the visit is over. She asks if he understood, and tells him to just focus on getting out of there. She also asks him to promise not to push himself too hard. She leaves, and the protagonist stops smiling. He's left alone, looking sad. He thinks about the promise they made. And then, remembering his past, the protagonist tells his friend about his father, that he made her that way. The girl gets upset, asking if he's really sorry, if he's mocking her. She says now's not the time to worry about others. His father is in a coma because the protagonist hit him with a vase, and if he doesn't wake up, the police won't leave him alone. Still, Young says it's nothing compared to the domestic abuse he endured, and that he won't get a severe punishment. Then we jump to the courtroom. The judge sentences the protagonist to 3 long years in prison. He's shocked. In another room, his friend tells him to eat well. If anyone bullies him, he should tell her. She makes him promise. He says goodbye to her. He explains that if you cause trouble, your sentence increases. If you behave, it decreases. He thinks about his time in prison, saying he'll endure and survive this hell for 3 long years. tears as he looks at a photo of him and his friend. Kim shows up, saying the girl isn't bad at all. The boy gets startled and hides the photo. The blonde guy asks if she's his girlfriend. He denies it, saying she's just a friend. Then Kim threateningly asks for the photo, but the protagonist refuses, saying it's not his to give. The bastard mocks him, asking if he's resisting now. He raises his hand, saying it's time for a little lesson. Just as he's about to hit Young, a prison guard introduces a new inmate to cell 36. Everyone's confused. No one heard anything about a new guy. Then, this bald guy walks in with 3039-7 on his shirt. The guard asks him not to cause trouble. They'll be watching him. Then the blonde thug freaks out, saying he knows that guy. He remembers he killed 7 delinquents from his school. His name is Ma Guillaume. His crime, murdering 7 people. His sentence, 20 years. The maximum for juvenile offenders. Everyone shrinks into their corners. The protagonist is shocked. Did he really kill 7 people? A weird tension fills the cell. Kim steps forward, telling everyone not to be scared, calling them idiots. He says he doesn't care that Guillaume killed 7. Everyone in there has blood on their hands. The blonde guy mocks the new kid, saying he looks angry. He threatens Guillaume, telling him to behave. But the newcomer doesn't seem to care. He just turns his back. Kim grins evilly, saying he'll go easy on him. Calling Guillaume an ungrateful bastard, he attacks him from behind. But the newcomer turns around and defends himself. Everyone's stunned. The blonde guy's pissed, thinking Guillaume's challenging him. Then he gets hit. Meanwhile, the protagonist thinks this guy is different. A guy who killed 7 people really isn't like the others. But surprisingly, it's Kim who lands the punch. Guillaume bleeds a lot. Young wonders why that happened. The poor guy gets beaten like a punching bag, while Kim mocks him, asking if he thinks he can challenge the boss. Kim says it doesn't matter if he's a killer or a thief. Everyone's beneath him. Everyone's disappointed. They thought the new guy was tough. The rookie gets beaten like a dog. While everyone laughs, the protagonist wonders if he's really just a weakling. Then the scene changes. Guillaume is kneeling in the center of the cell, which looks more like a luxury room. The self-proclaimed boss tells him to go fetch water, but Young notes that even after getting beaten, he stays quiet and refuses to obey. The bald guy is getting beaten, and the protagonist wonders where he learned to act like that. Not even a dog would be so clueless. The protagonist is cleaning the bathroom where he dunked his face, thinking that thanks to that useless rookie, he's the one suffering now. Later, that night, everyone's sleeping like princesses, and the protagonist is next to the rookie. He gets his attention, and when Guillaume wakes up, Young asks if he's an idiot, if it's really that hard to suck up to the boss. He says it doesn't matter how much he hates Kim. Kim is the king. Just shut up and do what he says. The protagonist tells him not to pretend to be tough if he can't fight, and that starting tomorrow, he should behave. Then Guillaume asks him if he truly accepts living that miserably. Young, confused, asks what he means. Is he giving advice? The protagonist reflects on what the rookie said. He begins recalling memories. In his thoughts, he answers Guillaume's question. Yes, he'll live miserably. He remembers when he beat his father. Blood all over his body until the job was done. The scene shifts to the protagonist's friend. She says it's so cold. Thinking about how skinny Young has gotten, she decides she should at least send him food. She says his personality would never let him ask her for anything, and inside that place, he must be suffering. She thinks he needs to eat well during times like these. She even wonders if he'd like it if it's just a small container. She begins crossing the street, lost in thought, and right in the middle of the crosswalk, a bus speeds through a red light. The girl is shocked, seeing the massive vehicle in front of her. Meanwhile, the protagonist sleeps in his cell. His friend is in serious danger. In the middle of the street lies the container with the food she meant to bring him. She's lying unconscious. Food spilled everywhere. Back in prison, a guard tells Young he's sorry. He asks what it's about, and the guard says there was a fatal accident in front of the prison yesterday. In few words, the guard tells him his friend was in the accident. Young is stunned, frozen by the news. Back in the cell, an inmate watches the protagonist standing still. Confused, Kim bangs the door, annoyed, asking why Young hasn't cleaned the bathroom. He approaches, saying Young has forgotten the danger. Then the blonde guy notices something's wrong with Young. The bald guy says there was a car accident, and the girl involved was Young's friend. The blonde guy smirks, saying if she was visiting him, they must have been dating, asking why he lied. Mocking him, the bastard takes Young's photo and laughs, asking what he'll do now that his girlfriend's Violence dead. He holds up the photo, calling her pretty. Too much for a guy like Young, then asks if anyone wants the photo for 501. Starting an auction. First offer is 600, then 700, then 1,000. The fat guy asks if everyone can date the girl. The bald guy says he's crazy. You can't date a dead girl. The blonde guy, with a creepy face, says if Yeon were alive, he'd have a lot of fun with her until there was nothing left. The shaggy-haired one calls him crazy, asking if he wants to get arrested again. The fat guy asks if that's Kim's type, and Kim says what's wrong with his taste. Meanwhile, Young is silently sitting there, and the rookie is just watching. He remembers when he asked the protagonist if he accepted living miserably, and how. The boy got confused by the question, but outside those thoughts, as Kim blabbers on, the rookie senses something. A punch suddenly flies at the blonde guy's face. It hits him square. The protagonist threw it, slamming his face into the ground. With a blank expression, everyone is shocked. The idiot got knocked out cold, and I was wrong to say the protagonist had no expression. The guy is furious. Gyum is surprised too. He remembers a moment before, the protagonist asked if he wanted to know about his life, and said his father was the right-hand man of a low-level gang leader. Since childhood, violence was his routine, but that man was his father, so he had to endure until one day he couldn't hold back anymore. Hearing this, the bald guy looked confused and a little scared. The protagonist said that time was when his father touched his best friend. Back to the present, Kim wakes up from his nap, and the first thing he does is curse Young. The spectators now rush the protagonist. The boy says he only learned one thing from his father while being beaten nearly to death, and now he shows what he learned very well. He's spilling ketchup from everyone, and Gyum's just watching, not helping at all. Time passes, and the fight is nearly over. Everyone's knocked out, if they're even still alive. Red everywhere. The blonde guy is begging Young for forgiveness, trying to bribe him, asking how much he wants. With his strange personality, he says money sounds great, but while acting like Luffy, he says he doesn't need it anymore because the reason he wanted to leave this place, the reason he hunted coins like a madman, the reason he endured all this, all those reasons are simply gone. The protagonist remembers when his father used to tell him to follow in his footsteps and become a gangster in the future. He always said that. Every time he beat him, the poor boy gets up from the floor, but he's knocked down again and again. The protagonist thinks that violence repeats itself every single day. When he was younger, he couldn't even look directly into the eyes of the man standing in front of him. Meanwhile, his father tells him that he has to become stronger, strong enough to one day earn that tattoo on his body. The protagonist thinks that the place where his anger and his eyes couldn't reach was those damned dragon eyes. Back in the present, in the prison, the guards show up after hearing all the noise, asking what's going on, but one of them is shocked by what he sees. He asks what the hell happened there. He can't believe it and questions the protagonist. Was it really him who did all this? And the boy admits it, saying he was the one who caused all that mess. Later on, the little monster is in another cell, isolated from the others, holding a piece of paper in his hand, a photo of him and his friend. He's visibly shaken, thinking about her, and he remembers a memory where she calls him crazy. She asked what kind of father beats his own son the day before the school entrance ceremony. She says that was way too much. Besides, he didn't even come to congratulate the poor boy. Young says it's fine because it's not the first time, but she insists it's not fine. She says she needs to talk to his dad, but the protagonist reminds her that she promised never to go to his house, and if she breaks that promise, she'll have to call him Appa for the rest of her life, which would be super embarrassing for her. The protagonist's friend says he sure knows how to humiliate a girl who doesn't even have a home, but Young says that's not what he meant. Out of nowhere, she brings up the city of Seoul. She says that once she finishes high school, she's going to move there. She's fed up with the frustrating orphanage life and this suffocating neighborhood. So she'll go, graduate from a good university, join a major company, rise in life, and get a luxurious apartment. The protagonist asks if she's really that materialistic, and she says he should already know that, but the poor guy gets sad and thinks if she leaves, he'll be all alone in this city. Then Yeon asks if he's going to come with her, almost like she's making a request. The boy is surprised, but then they make a promise. She says if he breaks it, he'll have to call her Nuna for the rest of his life. Then out of nowhere, a man shows up and says they make a beautiful couple and asks asks if he can take a picture for them. The protagonist says they're not a couple, but Yeon says he can take it anyway. He counts to 2 and snaps the photo, the same one Young always looks at. Back in the prison cell, poor Wall took a beating for nothing. He's thinking that if he hadn't ended up in a place like this, Yeon wouldn't have had to visit him, and filled with rage, Young starts punching the wall again. He can't stop thinking about his life. Why do all these things only happen to him? His hands start bleeding heavily while he blames himself for everything. The photo falls to the floor and he starts crying, thinking that everything turned out horribly, until a guard shows up calling for the boy, saying he's sorry that he's in such an unfortunate situation. He hasn't even touched his spoon to eat since yesterday, but this can't go on, so the guard asks him to calm down and eat his meal first. After all, no matter the reason, people still need to live. At that, the protagonist falls to his knees and says he's really sorry about all this, apologizing to his friend. The scene cuts to the cafeteria. Gyum is eating to get stronger until he hears someone talking about some rumors. Bowlhead says that a guy named Cha Ju-young beat up all his cellmates and got sent to solitary. Apparently, the cell leader mocked his girlfriend, who died in a car accident, and he completely lost it. Those listening say it was satisfying, at least. But a guy near Guillaume stands up, clearly pissed off. He walks up behind the gossiping kid and brings his hand near him. Suddenly, the guy slams the kid's head into the table. He asks what they're talking about without him, saying it sounds like something really fun. He wants to join the conversation. This guy is Park Jung-chan, locked up for being a professional robber. He asks what's so wrong about beating up the cell leader, and if defeating someone is so satisfying, then why? He asks them both if they want to beat him too. Everyone at the table freezes. They start backing off, saying they'd never do that, not even try. With that, the maniac lets go of Bowlhead's head, now buried in his food, and asks if he's okay. This kid apologizes, saying he said something unnecessary. Jung-chun is still pissed, but then calms down and asks for the protagonist's name. Is it Cha Ju-young? Everyone confirms. 1 week later, a guard talks to Young, saying Kim is still in the hospital because of him, and given the situation, he'll only be let out after a week, so he'd better not cause any more trouble. Time passes, and back in his old cell, the boy walks in like nothing happened, and everyone's silent, like he's that weird, quiet student at school. Gyum watches him, thinking that he committed insubordination against the cell leader, so the others won't just let that slide. Then, one of the guys calls the protagonist a bastard. He stands up, drawing Young's attention, but his tone changes as he asks if the poor guy is okay now after what must have been a rough time in solitary. Everyone gathers around him. The new guy's confused. They say solitary must have been tough, but now he can relax a bit. Everyone starts kissing up to the protagonist, asking if he wants a massage or a glass of water. Yum writes in his notebook that he learned something today. Look at the kid's little notebook. In school, what matters most is strength, family, influence, appearance, grades, and many other factors. But here, in juvenile detention, strength is everything. Later, everyone's out of their cells. The bald guy is off by himself, and the protagonist shows up next to him, calling for Guillaume. Young asks why he did that. Back when everything happened, when Young tried to kill the cell leader, Guillaume stopped him, held his arm. The protagonist says he killed 7 people and ended up there, so why stop him? Why would he do that? Young remembers when he did those things to 7 students, exhausted, standing, the whole room covered in his classmates' blood. The poor kid standing beside their bodies, but he's desperate, realizing what he did. Then, after remembering all that, Guillaume says he did it because, but that crazy guy from before shows up looking for the protagonist. The guy looks like a crackhead and says Young seems way weaker than he imagined. He gets close and asks how he managed to beat Kim, though that blondie was a weakling anyway. The protagonist ignores Young-chan, so Young-chan tries to threaten Young, asking why he did it. Why the insubordination? Was he desperate for the cell leader position? But the boy just tells him to get lost. He's not interested in titles or anything like that. Jung-chan is surprised, but he puts on that idiotic grin again. He says the protagonist must be some kind of arrogant asshole, then says there's one thing he really hates. And while kicking the protagonist, he says he hates bastards who don't know their place. He says he'll teach Young where his place is. Jung-chan grabs the protagonist's head and prepares to punch him, saying he'll show what happens when a dog bites its owner. But suddenly, a guard appears beside them. He gives the junkie a look. That makes him freeze and say he's been caught. He fakes it, saying they were just playing around, and the guard pretends not to see anything. After the guard leaves, Young-chan asks if the true protagonist knew about a rule. As the cell leader, under the excuse of keeping order, he can fight as much as he wants, so the protagonist can fight too. Landing another punch on the boy's face, Young-chan asks if he's not going to fight back like before. He even asks Gyum what's wrong with the protagonist for doing nothing. He lands a kick that sends the boy flying into the bars. He asks why Young's been stumbling around like a whipped dog all day. If he's gonna stay like this, it won't be much fun to beat him up. The protagonist looks up and notices Young-chan's arm. His tattoo looks a lot like his father's. He remembers the time he was getting beat up badly, his face all bruised, and he noticed the dragon tattoo on his dad's chest. Back to the present, Young-chan says. Judging by what the protagonist said, he didn't seem scared until he brings up what he heard happened, the car accident. And when he mentions the girl getting hit by a truck, he gets kicked in the face. The protagonist grabs his arm, flips him around, and slams his face into the bars with his foot. Holding his arm, Young-chan looks at the protagonist and calls him a bastard, but the protagonist doesn't look okay and tells him to repeat what he just said. Young-chan asks what he's talking about now, but the protagonist kicks his head again and demands he repeat it. Still, the crackhead gets pissed and says once he gets free, he's going to destroy Young, but his face gets pushed into the bars again, and the protagonist demands he repeat it. Young-chan's already in pain, and Young gets the brilliant idea to twist his arm like someone wringing out a rag. The guy starts crying, begging him to wait, asking what the hell he's doing, but all the protagonist says is repeat it. While finishing twisting the arm, Gyum stays there, watching as the crackhead screams in pain, and the protagonist keeps kicking the junkie's food bowl while demanding he repeat it, like a total psychopath. Eventually, Young-chan passes out, and Young thinks that since his childhood, the place where all his rage was directed was only ever towards those damned dragon eyes. Capitulo 3. After that, in the past, some old ladies were saying they'd heard the protagonist's father was a gangster, and that Young looked like someone who bullied others. That's why they thought he'd be a bad influence on the neighborhood. But meanwhile, the boy was thinking that staying calm, that was what he did best. He arrives at the gate of his house, but then he hears some strange noises. It's a scream, someone shouting from inside, and he recognizes that voice, which makes him even more worried. When he gets to the living room, his father says he arrived just in time. The monster is standing right there in the middle of the room, looking like Baki's dad, while his friend is lying on the floor. His father asks if that girl is his friend, and the poor guy stares in desperation and starts shouting her name. His father says she suddenly barged into someone else's house and started saying all sorts of nasty things. She said that if he ever laid a hand on the protagonist again, it'd be better if he didn't have a father like that. Young remembers when she said she'd go to his house to talk to his father, and the monster says that's why he had to scold her a little. Young can't take it. He starts to get really angry, but even then, he reminds himself he has to stay calm, since staying calm is what he's really good at. But then his father, looking at him, opens his mouth and tells him to say this to her. If she says something like that again, he'll have to do something unpleasant. And with that, all that calm vanishes, and Young thinks that on that day, he did something he doesn't regret even a little bit. The monster of a father says that if she talks like that again, he'll send her where her parents are. But the protagonist is already moving behind him with malice. After that, everything goes silent, only his friend is left in the living room. Meanwhile, Young is somewhere else, beating his father to what appears to be death, while thinking he couldn't stay calm like he always does. Sometime later, at the hospital, a doctor says his father is in a vegetative state. The chances of him waking up are minimal. What a shame, although not really. The doctor says it'll take a miracle for him to wake up. Young is still visibly on edge. He remembers his father's tattoo, and he thinks that now, finally, things are as they should be. With that, it's all over. But cutting to a new scene back in the Juvenile Detention Center, an audience of inmates wonders what's going on, and some say Young just got out of solitary and is already starting trouble again. The crackhead's arm is twisted all over, and the protagonist is just staring at the masterpiece he created. Some guards show up announcing that exercise time is over, and everyone needs to go back to their cells. So the kids start heading to their rooms. There's There's someone watching everyone through a window, and someone next to him asks if it's too noisy outside, saying maybe that's because there are too many energetic kids living together there. The man says he's happy. The guy watching the inmates is doing well since he just got out of the hospital. That man's name is Kwon Chang-sok, and he's the director of the juvenile prison. By the way, Kwon asks who this man came to see in a place like this. He's already got a feeling. Cutting to another scene. Everyone in the protagonist's cell is kneeling, terrified, staring at young. Juyum is a little hesitant, standing next to him. In his notebook, he writes that he thinks he's going to share a cell with an absolutely insane, totally deranged guy. But a guard shows up, calling the protagonist's name, telling him to come over because he's got a visitor. Cutting to another scene. The protagonist is walking alongside one of the guards. In his thoughts, he's wondering who could possibly be visiting him. His mother ran away when he was very young, and all his relatives are avoiding him. So once again, he asks himself, who could it be? They arrive at the director's office, and the protagonist is surprised. He wonders why he's even there, until someone starts speaking, saying it's been a long time. The protagonist feels an overwhelming pressure. Remembering his father, he wonders how this is even possible. The man says it was really nice seeing him so full of life that day. Then we get a flashback of his father in a coma. Young is in disbelief, thinking this is impossible. The not-so-mysterious man is, of course, the protagonist's father. His name is Cha Gangryong. Young remains terrified. He asks his father how he's even here. Then the old man from earlier shows up behind him, calling him a brat, saying he looks surprised. The old man says Gangry woke up miraculously not long ago, and asks the protagonist if that's a blessing, saying it's good his father is healthy. Young remembers the doctor saying his father's chances of waking up were basically zero, but then wonders why he's perfectly fine now. Meanwhile, Gangry says it's unbelievable. Despite being the right-hand man of an organization his whole life, the person who put him in that condition wasn't anyone he expected. It wasn't any of his enemies, or even the police. It was his own son. His father tells him that when he woke up and realized he was in a hospital, he was heartbroken. The protagonist wears a fearful expression, while his father puts on an act so ridiculous it makes you mad, saying that as his father, he really wanted to see him. Out of nowhere, Gangry tells Young that he loves him, and there's nothing he wouldn't do for his son, so he had no choice but to take that girl's life. Gangry remembers her when he saw her, terrified. When the truck came so close to her, the food flying across the pavement, her body on the ground, even when she could barely breathe. He was right there, watching it all. She even asked him for help, thinking he was just a regular person. She begged. The protagonist is already starting to lose it hearing this. Gangry says she realized just before the end that it was him, and he even asked if she'd seen a ghost. She told him the protagonist would be better off without a father like him, and angrily, he told her that's what a father can do for his son. Then, seeing that his job was done, he turned around to leave, but before going, he told the girl that maybe she didn't understand, since she didn't even have parents to begin with. He thought the protagonist was a pathetic son who would just stay silent. But that day was the first time he saw Young act. He realized the girl was the trigger, so he got rid of her. He came back from far away just to kill her, all for the sake of his son. So after hearing all this, that old man notices something in the protagonist. He tells the boy to wait, and when he sees Young charging at his father, he orders everyone to restrain him. The protagonist is consumed with pure rage, but then something terrible happens. The guards use taser guns to stop Young, and his body loses all control from the electricity. He collapses on the ground, unable to move. He tries, but there are too many tasers at once. The old man says that scared him a lot, and the poor boy is writhing in pain on the floor. His father walks up to him, asking if he wants revenge by killing his own father. Then he says he'll tell him the only way to end his life. Some members of the organization are already inside that juvenile facility. For now, they barely have tattoos, but some of them will surely become key players in the future. So he tells his son to prove he's the best of them all and take control of the juvenile prison. If he rises in the ranks and gains recognition, one day maybe he'll be able to defeat him and even surpass him as the organization's second in command. Gangry tells his son to prepare himself himself to face the organization called Heavenly Dragon. If the protagonist makes it out of that place, he'll achieve what his father never could in his entire life. And if Young does that, his father's life will finally be complete. He says this with that disgusting smile of his. Gangry asks the old man to take care of his son, and the old man tells him not to worry, but to ease our rage a little. Something good happens. The guards get scared, and they start increasing the taser intensity. The cowardly old man panics again, asking what's going on now. Meanwhile, Gangry is just chilling there. The protagonist starts pushing harder to resist, yelling at his father to stop talking bullshit. Gangry turns to look at Young, and the boy is already out of his mind behind him, saying he's going to kill him, and he's going to do it today. Everyone who sees this is terrified, including that old man whose name I don't even know. Young is on the verge of punching someone. Then he remembers his father telling him to prepare and face the Heavenly Dragon organization, and that, if he managed to do that, Gangry's life would be complete. With that in mind, the protagonist tells him to stop talking nonsense. He says he'll kill him. Just then, a handsome man appears, immediately apologizing for the intrusion. He calls our boy Young Master. Then he knocks him down. Everyone is paralyzed, not understanding what's going on. The handsome man keeps talking, saying it's his duty to serve the boss. Using all his strength, the protagonist tries to resist, but the handsome man feels the pressure and senses something strange. He wonders to himself if Young really thinks he can resist the strength of one of the Heavenly Dragon's commanders using only his legs. Then the jerk of a father calls the protagonist's attention, telling him to open his eyes and see what's happening around him, asking if he still hasn't understood that he will never reach him, saying that reckless actions will only hold him back, that the only way to kill him is to take control of the entire prison. The protagonist, already beaten up and lying on the ground, is filled with rage, and the jerk keeps saying that he'll be waiting for the day they meet again. Finally, Gangry leaves, calling Young's son, and they go away. Then the protagonist tries to stand up, thinking about what Gangry said. The scene shifts to the woodworking room where Guillaume is making a small table. A bald guard arrives, telling him to relax because he's already met his work quota for the day, and Guillaume nods in understanding. Meanwhile, the guy on the left calls Guillaume damn crazy, saying he's insane with that hammer, while the guy on the right asks if Guillaume didn't crack the skull of the bully who harassed him back in school using a hammer like that. The guy on the left says that no matter how much they look at him, Guillaume doesn't seem like a killer, and the guy on the right says he's just a big loser. Then another guy walks in, carrying a toolbox, and the bald guard tells him to put it on the shelf. As the newcomer is about to place it, he stops confused. He looks ahead, and he locks eyes with Guillaume, who's also confused. The crazy guy purposely drops the toolbox. The bald guard asks why he dropped it, and he apologizes, saying his hand slipped. A nail ends up landing close to the new guy's foot, lying on the floor. For some reason, Guillaume gets scared. The weird tattooed guy says that's amazing, asking if he really is Ma Guillaume. With a smile, he says it's been a while, asking if it's been since middle school that they haven't seen each other. His name is Yoon Gunmin, and he's in for theft and arson. Yoon says he saw the newcomer on the news and asks if anyone would have imagined they'd meet again in a place like this, and if Guillaume remembers him. Guillaume says, of course, proving he remembers, calling him by name, excited that Guillaume remembered. The crazy guy says he has a question for him. If that thing in the news, that he killed 7 people, if he really did that, Yoon can't believe it, because he doubts that Guillaume, the one from middle school, could have done something like that. With a serious face, Guillaume asks what he means by that, and Yoon says it's nothing. It's just that he was such a model student back then. Just then, a guard appears and tells Yoon to get back to his post and stop chatting nonsense. So Yoon says goodbye to Guillaume, calling him Guillaume, like they're childhood friends. After the tattooed, crazy guy leaves, Guillaume looks at his hand and realizes he pricked his finger because he was so startled seeing his old classmate. The scene switches to the prison. Everyone is back in their cells, sitting in groups and chatting. Only the protagonist is in his corner, alone. He's thinking about what his father said, that the only way to kill him is to take control of the entire prison. Young thinks that he's going to accept that man's challenge, the man who calls him son, and he wonders where he should start. Across the cell, the bald guy says he's hungry, and the one with glasses asks why there are only vegetables on the menu. Another bald guy asks if they shouldn't report this as a human rights violation, and the other bald guy says he just wants a slice of pizza and then he could die happy. The protagonist overhears the other prisoners' conversation and thinks about their wishes. Then one of the prisoners tells everyone to shut up because a guard is coming. With a serious look, Young goes up to the guard and calls him. The guard asks if there's a problem. The prisoners ask Young why he's doing this. The protagonist says it's nothing, and the guard looks confused. Then, out of nowhere, the protagonist asks if they deliver pizza. The guard gets annoyed and asks if he's forgotten he's in a prison. This terrifies everyone. With a serious face, the guard tells him to step outside, but the scene cuts to one of the prisoners thinking this is crazy because the pizza Young asked for is already in everyone's stomachs. Everyone is happy because they haven't eaten pizza in ages, and they even say they're about to cry. They thank the protagonist, while he thinks he can't believe this, since the director and the guards are all under his father's influence, and they're treating him so well just because he's that bastard's son. That's why he thinks he has to test the limits of what he can do in this prison. At the same time, while eating pizza, the prisoners wonder about the protagonist's true identity. If he's the son of some congressman, or maybe the third generation of some multinational family, but he thinks that for his revenge, he'll do anything. He'll even use the fact that he's Gangry's son. But someone asks why Guillaume is acting like that. They even offer him a piece of pizza, but another says to leave him alone because he's acting weird today. He's way more tense than usual. They wonder what's going on. Sometime later, Guillaume is with Young, making tools for the prison. Then something happens. That crazy tattooed guy shows up again, saying his hand slipped. He drops a bunch of nails on top of Guillaume. The poor guy gets punctured all over. Yoon apologizes, saying his hands are sweaty. Guillaume gets mad and calls the kid out, asking what he's doing. Then 3 other guys show up, asking Gunman what's going on, because Guillaume isn't acting like he said. Why is he staring at him? Yoon said Guillaume was his subordinate, but that doesn't seem to be the case. They ask the tattooed guy if it was a lie that the newcomer was a famous delinquent in his neighborhood. However, with a psychopathic smile, Yoon says it wasn't a lie. Guillaume has been flattering him since they were kids, and he's sure Guillaume hasn't forgotten those good old memories. Then Yoon gets closer to Guillaume, asking if he remembers back then, but something happens. The crazy tattooed guy grabs the newcomer's head and pushes it toward a nail, asking if that will help him remember, but remembering his past. Someone is asking Guillaume why he's trembling. Yoon is tormenting the poor guy, and he's begging the crazy guy to stop. Crying, Guillaume pleads, and the crazy guy asks what's wrong, saying it's hard to hear him from outside that box. Guillaume begs to be let out of that place. Yoon says he can't do that. With a psychopathic look, he says the fun is just beginning. Holding a hammer in his hand, he tells Guillaume to start counting. So Guillaume starts counting. When he reaches 3, something very bad happens. Back to the present, Yoon asks the newcomer if he remembers yet. Everyone's watching. The delinquents mock the newcomer, asking if he's trembling and saying the only thing left is for him to collapse on the floor. Yoon taunts Guillaume, saying there's no way he really killed anyone. When Yoon grabs more nails, someone grabs his arm, making him drop them all. The 3 delinquents are surprised. Yoon is also surprised when he realizes who it was. While Young is confused watching this, Guillaume asks Yoon if he wants to know how he killed someone. Surprised, Yoon couldn't believe what he heard. With all that mess, a guard announced that their break was over and they had to return to their spots. After that, Yoon, angry, told Guillaume not to touch him. Meanwhile, the delinquents left, saying it had been really fun. Yoon let it go and walked away, furious, thinking the newbie was still a loser. The scene shifts to the long-haired guy asking whether Jesus or Buddha would win in a fight. One delinquent said it'd be Jesus, but another called him an idiot and said it'd be Buddha. While those two argued, the fat guy told them to take that debate outside the cell. After they left, only the protagonist and the newbie remained. The atmosphere tense. The protagonist thought for a moment and said, "Thank you," but the newbie didn't understand what he meant. Young said that if Guillaume hadn't stopped him earlier, he might have ended up spending a few more decades in that prison. The newbie asked why he asked that question before, And the protagonist said he now had a reason to get out of that place, because the man who killed his best friend was his own father. Guillaume pointed out that the protagonist had said his father was in a vegetative state, and Young replied that it was a long story. In any case, he thanked Guillaume, since the protagonist would soon be leaving that place. But the newbie stared at him, asking if Young was messing with him. How could he say that to someone sentenced to 20 years? The protagonist said it wasn't like that. One day, he'd repay that debt. Things calmed down after that, as the newbie understood what Young meant. Then, the scene changed to someone handing a key to Guillaume, apologizing and saying they had to urgently take care of something at home, so Guillaume would have to clean that room alone. He accepted and turned around, noticing the table, until he saw a moth there. Looking at it, he remembered Yoon. And in his memories, someone told him to take a look at a moth, that someone was 11-year-old Yu, asking Guillaume if he didn't think the collection he'd made was amazing. But the newbie said he didn't like moths or butterflies because he thought they were gross. While Yoon was showing off his collection, Guillaume thought that he was his first friend. However, some other kids entered the room saying that Yoon was weird because he was an insect collector, and that was disgusting. One of them even came up to Yoon, asking if he kept them to eat them later. Yoon denied it, but the three started bullying him, trying to force him to eat one, until Guillaume stepped in, telling them to stop and go back to their seats. The three got scared of getting in trouble since Guillaume was the class rep and left, apologizing. The newbie asked Yoon if he was okay, and the boy said yes. Cheered up again, Yoon asked if Guillaume remembered his promise to come to his house later, but then some other kids showed up, asking the newbie to play with them, so he went with them, making plans and leaving Yoon alone at his table. In his thoughts, Guillaume wondered when things had started to change, but he couldn't really pinpoint it. Anyway, they truly drifted apart. The next following year, they were in different classes and spent much less time together. And in one of his memories, Guillaume heard some kids gossiping about Yoon, saying he was getting picked on by bullies and had even gotten beaten up earlier. When he heard them say Yoon had been taken to the storage shed, Guillaume got scared. He ran straight there, worried about what might have happened to his friend. When he finally got to the place, out of breath, he opened the door to the shed. The place was full of animals. The bullies sarcastically asked where Yoon was. Suddenly, from behind Guillaume, Yoon appeared, saying he was right there. He pushed the newbie against a door. Guillaume tried to resist, asking what the hell the crazy kid was doing, but Yoon told him to shut up and get in already. He managed to shove the newbie in and lock him up. The bullies were amazed that Yoon had really trapped his own friend like an insect. He had to do it to get into the bullies' group, but no one thought he'd really do it. Guillaume screamed, begging the crazy kid to let him out and asking what was wrong with him. But Yoon told him to wait a minute, because when they caught an insect, they had to start taxidermizing it while it was still alive. It was a method of preserving insects. Coming out of his thoughts, Yoon said that butterflies and moths were both insects, but one was hated and the other loved. It was just like he'd been back then, and it was all Guillaume's fault. The newbie was confused, asking what he meant by that and why it was his fault, but the boy told him not to play dumb. He asked if Guillaume really thought he wouldn't notice him pretending to be nice to everyone while slowly drifting away and betraying him. He said he knew full well that in Guillaume's mind, he was a disgusting moth, while Guillaume was the butterfly everyone liked. When he realized that, he felt every day of his life getting harder. But even so, the one who made him like that jumped off a cliff willingly. When he saw the news that Guillaume had killed 7 people, he felt so happy, saying it felt like karma. But Guillaume was furious, asking what Yoon meant by that. What had he done because of him? But he felt something off, and Yoon said it didn't matter. His life was already ruined, and it was about to turn to dust. Those 2 guys appeared, holding the newbie down, telling the crazy kid Yoon that they knew he wasn't normal after he bribed the guard. Yoon said, even so, it wasn't over yet, because after catching the insects, they had to taxidermize them. That's when Guillaume realized he was in a really bad spot. He started begging the bullies to wait a bit, but Yoon said that because of him, everything that happened was his fault. But Guillaume, trapped inside, asked if he really thought he'd fall for the same trick twice. However, Yoon said he had prepared a special present for him inside. There were insects crawling all over his feet and all over the box around him. The poor guy freaked out, but he still didn't scream. the psychopath Yoon asked if he liked it. When there was no answer, he asked if Guillaume had already passed out and wasn't talking because of that, or if he was just holding it in. The bullies started mocking Guillaume, calling him a tough guy. One of the bullies even asked if Crazy Yoon was feeling bad for Guillaume, since he was a killer. But the boy asked what he meant by killer. The father figure type there called the kid son of a fine mother. Yoon said the fun was only just beginning, because from now on, he was going to make the poor Guillaume scream until his throat tore. But suddenly, the protagonist appeared right in the middle of everything, asking the psychopathic delinquent what exactly he was going to do. Everyone there was startled, asking why he'd suddenly shown up, but Young repeated the question, asking how Yoon wanted to make the newbie scream. He put a hand on one of the bullies' shoulders, asking if that was how he planned to do it. One of the other guys lunged at the protagonist to attack him, but he immediately got a kick to the face that sent him flying, just to let him know who he was dealing with. The guy went flying meters away, and Young, calm, asked if that was maybe how Yoon wanted to torture him. Now only one last bully was left. He was shaking in his boots. Meanwhile, the protagonist opened the box Guillaume was trapped in, saying he'd pay off his debt right now, and he started beating up the spoiled brat. Going back a little in time, someone is asking where Guillaume is, and someone else says a supervisor called him to the grocery store. He was suddenly called out to help with the cleaning, and the protagonist is listening to this. Then he gets up. He goes to the door of the room, calling for one of the guards. The officer asks what he wants again, and everyone inside gets excited, hoping the protagonist is going to ask for pizza again. But Young just asks the officer to open the door. With that, everyone inside gets confused, and the guard, with a threatening look, asks what the protagonist just said. But back in the present, Young is standing next to two guys who have fallen. The only delinquent left asks if he is that Chaju Young who has been causing trouble lately, and the coward who was scared shitless is now all confident, thinking he's going to come out on top. This time, Yoon says that earlier he saw the protagonist with Guillaume, but he didn't really understand what was going on. So he asks if the protagonist is close to the newbie, and he starts to be sarcastic, saying it's great that Guillaume has such a reliable friend, and says that he wishes he had a friend like that too. The delinquent who's still there says that Young is a very loyal friend, until he suddenly attacks the protagonist while asking if he wants to be his friend too. But out of nowhere, the big guy is already upside down. He was grabbed like a feather by Young, and the protagonist slams the thug's head straight into the ground, saying that this thing about being friends, he would rather die than be that. So now that the thug is down, Yoon becomes a coward again. The protagonist asks him why he did this to the newbie and says that he went too far, but Yoon doesn't seem to like that, and he asks if Young is messing with him. He asks if the protagonist knows how much he suffered because of that traitor, pretending to be his only childhood friend, pretending to care about him while stabbing him in the back, always dragging him down and biting him like a snake trying to kill him. The psychopath tells the protagonist that he should also be careful while he's with Guillaume, until the giant father figure appears again, choking Young and asking if he thinks the protagonist can take him down so easily, seeing as he was taken down. While the delinquent is choking the protagonist, Yoon says that all of this was preparation for this moment, and he orders the giant to finish Young off. Meanwhile, the thug is asking if now the protagonist wants to be his friend. And while he's being choked, the protagonist is thinking that this guy's grip is really strong, and he didn't want to have to get out of it like this, but he has no choice. So he breaks one of the thug's fingers, telling him it's better to say goodbye since he won't be able to use it anymore. But suddenly, the idiot Yoon stabs the protagonist in the gut. The bastard tells Young not to forget that he can fight too, and the giant thug even thanks the psychopath for the little help. With that, the protagonist thinks he can't really breathe, but Guillaume finally appears, telling the thug to let the protagonist go, saying that if he doesn't, he's going to break Young's neck, while the madman has a chain in his hands. Yoon is startled by Guillaume showing up again. He wonders when he managed to get out of the closet, and he remembers when the protagonist kicked one of the idiots, thinking he must have broken the lock. Then the protagonist takes advantage of the fact that he got out of the hold, and gives a big kick to Yoon's gut. With that, he says that was close. Meanwhile, the thug caught up in the chains is now suffering there, saying it really hurts and it's painful. So he starts to try to pull himself free, and Yoon, still awake, starts cheering for him instead of helping out in any way. But Gyum says that he warned him that if he uses more force, his neck will end up breaking. Said and done. The father figure even spat. Red liquid started to drip down the chains, and Gyum tells him to stop forcing it, just relax and stop pulling if he doesn't want to die. But the delinquent passed out anyway because he ran out of air. The guy fell to the ground, like Tyus Carlos in a pool. Even so, the newbie got tired because he had to use a lot of strength, and the protagonist is just standing there watching with his hand on his waist. Meanwhile, Gyum looks in the direction of the pampered kid who gets startled, and he starts walking toward him while the kid begs him to wait, saying he's the victim here, and again, blaming everything on Gyum. He says this was all self-defense, and he didn't do anything wrong. But even so, Gyum gets right up close to him with a terrifying pressure. The poor kid even fell to the ground, shitting himself in fear, and on the ground, he crouches down in front of the newbie, apologizing for everything, saying he's really sorry, saying he must have lost his head for a moment. The kid starts spouting a bunch of nonsense, saying he's a loser and an idiot by birth, and Gyum should think of this as another mistake he made, but the newbie says he never thought of Yoon that way. The kid suddenly looks confused. The newbie tells Yoon that his selfish illusion has already ruined his life, and that's not going to change. After taking out 7 idiots, he seriously thought about what he would do with him there. But looking at him now, Gyum says he doesn't hate him that much because the two of them used to be friends. The kid was speechless. He remembers his childhood, but the idiot is beyond saving and thinks that Gyum is a fool, and soon he will. But the protagonist appears, leg ready, saying that what Yoon did to him before hurt a lot. Then Young hits the guy, and he bounces around the warehouse like a ping pong ball, and he ends up unconscious. The cunning protagonist even says that he's returning the pain, and Gyum, seeing this, sometime later, the two of them are sitting, and the protagonist calls the newbie. When he answers, Young asks if he's an idiot, and Gyum asks what he's talking about. The protagonist says that a guy who took down 7 people is afraid of a little chicken like that. But Gyum says he wasn't afraid, and with that, the protagonist says he already knew. He doesn't know what the deal is between the two of them, but it's obvious that he doesn't see that poor guy as an enemy, and Gyum says he understands things. The protagonist stands up but ends up feeling pain in his stomach because of the wound, but Gyum gets his attention, thanking him for the help with everything before, and Young, being humble, asks what he's talking about, but out of nowhere, something happens. A strange guy appears behind the two of them, staring directly at Yoon, lying on the ground. The protagonist turns around, wondering who that guy is. Meanwhile, the weird guy is talking to the unconscious boy, asking who told him to leave his cell without permission, asking if he knows how scared he got without Yoon there. And as he punches the boy's sleeping face, he says there was a cockroach in the cell and no one to catch it, so he thought he was going to die from fear. The guy keeps punching the poor kid over and over while the two of them watch everything. The stranger finally calms down and gets up there, saying that he got blood all over his face. He really hates getting dirty because it's full of germs. Out of nowhere, the guy grabs the protagonist by the shirt, pulling him, but just to use the shirt as a rag to clean his face. And after finishing wiping off the dirt, the stranger asks the protagonist how his face is, if it's clean now. The protagonist doesn't respond, so the guy asks again if his face is clean, ordering the protagonist to answer him. Young hesitates for a moment, but with his pure audacity, he says it's not clean, but rather really dirty. Hearing that, the crazy guy is surprised, and getting more irritated, he asks if he's filthy, while attacking Young with a lot of anger, until a guard shows up, calling his attention and telling him that if he's done with his work, he should go back to his cell. But when the guard realizes something is happening, he asks what they're doing there. Suddenly, the crazy guy starts repeating the number on the protagonist's shirt. He keeps repeating it over and over again to memorize it. The guy gets so close that he's practically sniffing Young's neck. But after that, the scene changes. The protagonist is asking what's going on with the people from his cell, why everyone is around him since they're not in their room anymore. The long-haired guy asks if he's serious with that question. The long-haired guy's name is Gu Numin, and he's also an inmate in cell 36. In front of them, some people are talking about how Young defeated a cell boss by breaking his arm, And Gu Naman says they're close to the protagonist because he's really strong, and with Young near them, no one would dare to come over to fight. So the protagonist replies, telling them to do whatever they want, as long as they don't bother him, since he has a few things to do. He thinks about the tattoo of a blue dragon embroidered with red flowers, more commonly known as the Red Flower Dragon, and he needs to find the guys who have that tattoo on their body. Looking around everywhere, he wonders where they are, those damn organization henchmen. Naman, standing next to him, asks what he's looking for, and the protagonist says there's something he's after. So Naman asks him to tell him what it is, saying that he might not look like it, but he's known for finding lots of information. The protagonist talks about the tattoo, but Naman doesn't understand what it means, so he says he's after a filthy tattoo. But the scene shifts to someone saying that criminal gangs and juvenile delinquents have started getting out of control. The people in Cell 36 are watching the Moors. News on TV, talking about criminals forming organized groups to extort money and material goods. Violent acts and serious crimes among teenagers keep increasing, and the protagonist says that's pathetic, that these little thugs should rot in jail for 1,000 years. But it seems not everyone liked what he said. Someone says not everyone locked up there is a bad person. This guy says he'll tell the protagonist how he ended up in there. So he starts telling how some time ago there was a tteokbokki shop in his neighborhood. He was a regular customer there because the texture and harmony of the ingredients were next level. But one day, a lunatic, the son of a local congressman who only used his dad's influence, showed up there asking for some tteokbokki. But when it came time to eat, he got mad because of the ingredient, since it was made with rice cakes. And the jerk trashed the shop because he wanted it made with wheat cakes. But at some point, hearing all that commotion, he showed up, bragging and calling himself the leader of the tteokbokki's enthusiasts. The fight ended with his easy and complete victory, making him the hero of that shop. But he ended up in prison because of the congressman's irresponsible upbringing. He says he doesn't regret anything he did, but someone interrupts him, saying he's lying again. They ask the protagonist if he knows Naman's nickname, saying it's Gu Ramen, basically a liar's nickname. They say they found out he was caught lying in his last cell, and that's why they kicked him out of there. But Naman insists that everything he said is the truth. Even so, everyone keeps doubting him, but the protagonist trusts him, saying he doesn't seem to be lying. The boy looks confused and asks what he means. Meanwhile, in his head, he's thinking about how aphids provide sugar to ants, and in return, the ants protect them. That's basically been his relationship with the bullies in that prison. From the start, he was the aphid for the ants to protect, and he can say he's lived his whole life like that. But one thing he's sure of is that the boss of that cell is Ju Young, and Ju Young, the protagonist, seems to like him. He thinks if he could become the protagonist's right hand, his life would be so much easier. And finally, spring has arrived, always filled with the scent of flowers. The boy is messing around with the garden until, by accident, he throws a bit of dirt on someone behind him. That crazy guy from before crouches next to Naman and asks the boy what he did and why he did it. The boy freezes in terror, remembering when he was in his old cell and he was practically on the floor, unable to breathe. The crazy guy was saying he was going to clean his dirty mouth. With that, the boy thinks he's run into this lunatic again, his ex-cell boss, a madman with mental problems who's losing it over that bit of dirt on his face. While he wonders in his head what this crazy guy is doing there, he apologizes, saying he didn't see him there. The crazy guy asks if the boy is going to clean up that dirt, and scared, Naman says he'll wipe it all off and leave it spotless. But for a bit of fun, the crazy guy pulls something out of nowhere and sprays it on Naman's face, saying he's going to clean him first. With that on his face, the boy starts screaming in panic from the pain. He even rubs dirt in his eyes to see if it helps. But the lunatic says he actually has something he wants to ask the boy. He says the number on the protagonist's shirt, but Naman doesn't understand. And again, the crazy guy keeps repeating the number, asking if he's in the same cell as the protagonist. So Naman remembers that 7199 is the number on the protagonist's shirt. At that moment, the crazy guy starts going nuts again, screaming that the protagonist called him dirty. The guy starts ranting about how hard he tries to stay clean, and when Naman says he agrees with him, the lunatic says they should both go after the protagonist together because he wants to show him how to sterilize and disinfect filth. Oh, and the crazy guy even has the tattoo that Young is looking for. But the scene changes again to the protagonist's cell. He's doing some push-ups in there while he wonders where the other guys are, the ones with that filthy dragon tattoo. In his mind, he's threatening them all, until Naman shows up again, complimenting the protagonist's muscles to suck up to him, even asking if he works out, but saying that, whatever, the lunatic suddenly offers him a glass of grape juice, saying it's good to drink some juice after working hard. Young stands up and takes the glass, saying he'll drink it, but looking inside, the color of the liquid isn't like grape juice. So with a threatening look, Young asks him who gave this to him, an insecticide. Then, going back to some past memories of Naman, that crazy guy is asking him why he did it. Because of his lies. He made him dirty, and so the filthy mouth that lied to him needs to be cleaned. With a bottle of cleaning solution in hand, the lunatic says he's going to start the disinfecting process. Meanwhile, Naman thinks about that first room where he was placed, where that psychopathic clean freak was. It was simply hell on earth because of the demon that slept in there. But back to the present, the protagonist is asking what's inside the cup, who gave it to him, but the boy lies, saying he obviously bought it himself with his own money. Everyone in the cell on seeing this scene says it seems suspicious, and even asks if he put something in there, saying he should drink it first. Young asks why Naman suddenly decided to give that to him, and Naman wonders if the protagonist has started doubting him now. But given his current image as a liar, it's something natural to think. But out of nowhere, the protagonist drinks the liquid in the cup that Naman handed him,